What can you expect to lose from week to week as you go through this calorie deficit process? Hello everybody, Jason Davis here at Body Remastered Coaching, specific for those living with diabetes or at risk of diabetes. Now, this video section is going to be about how you actually create your own diet plan, your own personalised plan. I'm going to go through the 5-step process at Body Remastered in helping you design that. As a diabetic, or as taking into account medication and a whole host of other things as well. Now, as we go through this 5-step process, like I said, the key is about ultimately having a diet that works in the long term. There are so many different types of diets out there, and ultimately, yes, you can use certain diets as a guide, but you need to work out what diet works for your lifestyle and your situation. And that's what Body Remastered is all about. So we're going to take you through this journey of building your own nutrition plan. There's going to be 5 steps, and we're going to cover the first step in this video. The 5 steps, the first step is going to be working out your maintenance calories, and then how do we adjust that in terms of then reaching your goals, whether it be fat loss, muscle building, or just ultimately becoming a higher performed athlete, or higher fitness. Then the second section is going to be about working out your macronutrient intake. The third step is going to be knowing what to eat and when to eat, and building that into your plan. And ultimately the fourth step is going to be then assessing how those changes are looking from week to week and what you need to adjust in order to keep getting results. And that's going to be based on a lot of things such as medication, how you're feeling, lifestyle, mood. You can look at whole different things. It's not just the scales. So we'll cover that in step 5. So this is about step 1, which is working out your maintenance calories. Now, your maintenance calories are absolutely key because this is ultimately the amount of calories that you need, of course based on a little bit of your activity levels, that you need ultimately just to maintain your weight. We need that as a baseline. That way we know what we need to do depending on your ultimate goal. Now, there are some key points here. First of all, there are thousands of different equations that you can use on the internet right now to work out your maintenance calories. And they will ask you different questions like your age, are you sedentary, are you active, moderately active, very active, and no one of them is considered as absolutely perfectly accurate. It is an estimate, okay? It's a complete estimate, so therefore don't get too bogged down on the figure. But we need an initial figure to start with. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what particular equation you want to use. Maybe you used ones in the past, you can use ones from the NHS, it really doesn't matter. Here at Body Remastered we have an equation you can use. There are different examples. There are ones where you can multiply your body weight in pounds by 15 to get your maintenance calories. That's if you're a moderately active person. There's loads of different types, so don't get too worried about that. Work with your coach to determine your maintenance calories. The reason why you shouldn't get too bogged down by the actual number in the end, because this is, in a minute I'm going to tell you about how we adjust it, is because, as I said, it's not an accurate number. Not just because of the equations you're using, but because each individual person is different. We're not all the same. Your ultimate maintenance calories can be affected by a lot of different things. It could be affected by the way in which you as a person react to a deficit. There's also a concept called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And that can have an impact on your maintenance calories. It just means, your general fidgeting and movement throughout the day. A next big thing that can have an impact on your maintenance calories is medication. This can be key for diabetics. If you're taking certain hormone replacement drugs, or for example insulin, that could have an effect on your metabolic rate ultimately. And then the other side of this is body composition. This is why sometimes your BMI is not accurate either. Body composition, if you've got muscle mass, and it might not be, you might actually consider yourself as muscular, but you might have quite a lot of muscle mass generally, when you get the term big boned. You might have a lot of muscle mass, and that muscle mass has an impact on your metabolism. And so therefore the amount of calories that you're burning. If you have more muscle on you, you're generally burning more calories even at rest. So this is key, and that's why, as I said, just work out your maintenance calories, stick to a figure, and then we'll get more accurate as we move forward. So now you know your maintenance calories as a rough estimate, as I said. The next step is then adjusting that maintenance calorie number. So this depends on your goal. Let's talk about fat loss first. If your ultimate goal is fat loss, maybe you want to build muscle later, but you first want to concentrate on fat loss. We then need to focus on what we call a calorie deficit. And you typically want to take about 20% reduction in your maintenance calories to be your new calorie deficit number that you want to attain to. Okay, so 20% is a rough estimation again, because it does depend how active you are. You want to be a bit careful. If you're an extremely active person, then you may not want to go as high as 20%, because ultimately it could impact your muscles, your muscle mass, or it could impact your performance in training. But ultimately, the reverse can be also true. If you're a very inactive person, you might be able to go a little bit higher at first than 20%, if you really want to get some losses. But we'll talk about week-to-week changes in later videos. So, how do I create a deficit? Well, ultimately two ways. One, reduce the amount of food intake that you're getting per day. Hence, you're going to reduce the calories by 20%. And you can also increase the amount of activity levels that you are. Now, the balance between those two must be really carefully judged. This is where your coach can support you on this, because ultimately, if you're not getting the right nutrients in place and reducing your calorie intake by too much, it's going to affect your performance, and it's also going to affect potentially your glucose levels as well. So you've got to be careful. You need to make sure that you balance the approach, and sometimes adding a bit of extra activity and not missing out on essential food groups would be the better choice in order to ultimately get to your goal of reducing your overall calorie intake. You should typically see a loss of about 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. So that's around about half a pound to a pound, to no more really than a pound and a half. So, and that's what we call gradual change, and it's important. Now, of course, if you're starting off with a much higher body fat percentage, then you might lose at a higher rate than that. Similarly, if you're quite lean to begin with, and you don't have a huge amount when it comes to body fat percentage, then your rate is going to be lower than that. But ultimately, that's just a guide. If you have an extreme deficit and you keep reducing week by week in an extreme way, it's only going to cause issues in the long run. It could cause a potential loss in muscle mass, reduce metabolic rate. Your resting metabolic rate could be reduced, which is not good. It could cause decreased performance in your training. It could also lead to hunger signals as well, and just poor mood, and ultimately leading to you not enjoying the whole process and returning back to old habits. So again, we're in this for the long run, not for short-term wins, even though we will get to the result and the goal in the end. So what about muscle mass gain? What if that's your goal? Well, unlike fat, you've got to look at it a bit differently. It takes much longer time to build muscle in the right way. And again, it's very individual specific. And that's why the calorie adjustment shouldn't be as high as 20%. You should really look at increasing your calories by about 10%. The reason I say 10% instead of as much as 20 is because it can be easy to increase your fat if you're not careful. So you have to have a small surplus of around about 5 to 10%, a small change in calories, so that you're not inadvertently putting on too much fat as you're increasing your muscles, because muscle mass, putting on muscle, is an anabolic process. So obviously it needs energy to do that, but you don't want to be putting on excess fat as a result of that. So in terms of results, it really does depend on the individual and how much training experience you've had when you're building muscle. But what can you expect from week to week? So if you're a beginner, you're new to training, the stimulus is going to be completely different. And the weight gain you can expect is around about 1 to 1.5% of your body weight per week. Whereas if you're an intermediate or an advanced trainer, really that increase is going to be about 0.5 0.75% of body weight per week, because as I said, it really does depend on how much you've been training, because obviously there is a genetic limit. You can't keep putting on muscle mass, so it really is dependent on where your journey is on that with respect to how quickly you're going to be gaining weight and gaining the right type of weight to the desired body composition you want to achieve. So that's all that's involved in step one of building your own diet and nutrition plan. Now, there are lots of ways of doing that in terms of working through an equation and helping you adjust your calories based on your specific maintenance calorie number. So if you're unsure, work with a coach at Body with Marston, and we'll show you step by step of how you can first of all work out your maintenance calories and then adjust it based on your goals. And of course, we can understand what your training experience is, and then also when it comes to, for example, fat loss and reaching a calorie deficit, what's the difference between training versus reducing your intake? How do we maximize and optimize those so it's not affecting you as a person? And of course, it has to fit in with your lifestyle. But we'll talk about that as we go further, because remember, we're not going to have the full picture straight away. It's going to be a guide in terms of the maintenance calories and your small adjustment to reach your goal. But as we go from week to week, you will find out what do I need to adjust a bit further? What do I need to change? Things like that. That is the whole process. That's how we build a personalised plan in the end. You can't build it just by getting an off-the-shelf plan, because it won't work. It really needs to be something that you measure from week to week and determining how it's affecting your body, how you're feeling, what your mood is, and are you getting to your results. So the next step we'll talk about in the next video, and that's your macronutrient intake. That's going to be absolutely key, especially as a diabetic. So look forward to seeing you in that. As always, I'm not a medical professional. Make sure you reach out to your doctor if you're making any drastic changes to your diet. At Body with Marston, we're here to support you to reach your transformation goals. If you like the video, please like it, share it, and subscribe, because we're really here to help anyone living with diabetes to really transform their body. Doesn't matter what their goal is, we can help them do that here at Body with Marston. So look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.